Okay. All right. Well, then I guess I'll jump in and start. First of all, I want to say what a good-looking audience there is today, all of you. Very nice. I feel very humbled to be sitting next to these two gentlemen as well. And I feel very humbled to be with everybody at this conference because everybody has contributed so much to where we are today. We know there is still so much to be done, but without the foundations being built in previous years, there wouldn't be the chance for success. And we are on the precipice of success on so many levels. My name is Joe Garcia. I'm Vice President of Public Policy at Chicanos por la Causa. I'm also Executive Director of Chicanos por la Causa Action Fund. Right now we are conducting a $10 million Get Out the Vote campaign in Arizona. It's called Latino Loud. I brought my very lovely model here. Amanda, please, can you show your Latino Loud t-shirt? There it is, Latino Loud. Look at her. Amanda lives and works here at CPLC in Texas because at Chicanos por la Causa, we operate in 5 southwestern states. Arizona, where we began in 1969, but we also have operations in Texas, of course, also in New Mexico, Nevada, and also California just recently. And we're soon to expand into Colorado and Utah. So the whole Southwest, if you will. And what we provide at Chicanos por la Causa, it runs everything from early childhood development all the way to senior housing. And in between, we do health and human services. We do domestic violence shelters. We also have some shelters in a homeless campus in Las Vegas. We do utility assistance. We do a lot of affordable housing, which we're very happy to do. Some people accidentally, they call us Chicanos por la Casa, which is okay, I think, because we do enough affordable housing. I'm like, all right, we'll take that. But we do a lot of different things. We also do advocacy, which I'm involved with in both the 501c3 and most recently in our 501c4. That's the Action Fund. That's the one where, as a nonprofit advocacy organization, we can do more of what we originally did back in 1969, which is, we can challenge authorities and government and policies. We can support candidates that we think are right through our PAC. We can push for initiatives like we are right now in Arizona. It's called Proposition 308, which would allow Arizona Dreamers who graduate from Arizona high school to pay in-state tuition. Right now, Arizona is one of only about, I think, 6 states that in a very punitive manner forced out-of-state tuition for Dreamers in Arizona. So many Dreamers have to either leave the state or they don't go to college, which makes no sense. And it's ridiculous. So we're fighting that, trying to get that passed and corrected at the ballot box. So we also have a lawsuit that we are just joining right now. It's fighting against some voter suppression laws in Arizona that would essentially kick people off the voter rolls, whether or not they were found guilty, but just on suspicions. If you spoke Spanish, or if you were a recent U.S. citizen, and they think that you aren't a citizen, they can kick you off the rolls under this new law. So we are challenging that in court. We do a lot of advocacy work in addition to all those good services and programs that we talked about. Amanda here, she's an executive vice president, which outranks me. I'm just a lowly vice president. But Amanda works with so much, making sure that we have funding, grants, and so forth to pay for these wonderful programs we do. But we also do some real estate operations, which is on our for-profit side, which helps underwrite some programs that aren't being funded through grants or federal funding and so forth. So we do the full scope of services. We have some charter schools. We push for education because we know that's the great equalizer. We probably have about, 2,000 employees. Our operating budget, I want to say it's about $200 million. And here in Texas, I think it's about 30 million right now, right? And growing. So recently in Texas, we also operated a facility for unaccompanied minors that came here, and we took care of, I think at some point we were all up to the maximum, which was what, close to 1,500 kids. And these kids, as you know, that come mostly from Central America, came here to our country to seek refuge. These kids were coming from war-ravaged countries, or they were being forced into gangs. Maybe they lost a brother and sister, didn't join the gangs or drug cartels. I mean, violence. I mean, it was so sad. And most of them have been abused on their way up here, physically, sexually, every which way. And they come to our country, and if not us, if we don't treat them with respect, because they're us, they're our people, who's going to treat them? The Border Patrol? We've seen what it looks like, the Border Patrol. They put those kids in cages and throw an aluminum foil on them for a blanket and act like they're in prison. Not what we did. We treated these kids with respect from the second they step off that bus and they get a medical exam. When they walk through the doors, our staff was lined up and we greeted them all with applause. And we welcomed them, bienvenidos, to our country. And we told them that they're in a safe place and they're going to be treated well. And to see those kids' face light up and know that somebody cared about them, I'm telling you, I'm not an emotional person, but it still chokes me up a bit because these kids never had anything. Certainly never had anyone applaud them and tell them that it's going to be okay and they're going to be safe. And in that program, and we have a couple smaller programs now that we're working with, it is all about reunification, putting these kids with a family that's already up here or a better family. But we want to make sure we don't take them from a bad situation to another bad situation. So there's a lot of casework, but we're very, very happy to be involved in that as well. So who is Chicanos por la Causa? I just gave you kind of a real quick menu of what we do. But our roots were in 1969 when in Phoenix we challenged the discriminatory rules, laws, and policies, especially related to education. We were treated like third-class citizens in education. I know, it rings a bell, right? We're still there. We're still fighting the fight. But we've gotten better at it. We've gotten, as you know, and we've gotten bigger. But we've never forgotten our roots. And that's why in 2.5 years ago, we launched the Si Se Vota CPLC Action Fund, which is the advocacy arm to get back to our roots so we can kind of give them the 1-2 punch, right? Because we know that to have positive outcomes, we have to first start at the beginning of the pipeline and put good things in there, including good public officials, good public policies, an electorate. The $10 million Get Out the Vote campaign in Arizona is unprecedented, it's historic, and it's pure. And pure in that it's not related to any candidate or any party or any agenda except to get more Latino participation at the ballot box. And who we are going after, we're not just going after Latino voters, we actually are going after Latino non-voters. Those are the Latinos who are on the voter rolls but who haven't voted in 1 or 2 election cycles. Or maybe they've never registered to vote. Well, we're registering them. We have everything from canvassing. We'll be knocking on 800,000 door knocks to contact people in Latino neighborhoods. We sent out mailers, which will be 2 million mailers going out statewide, telling people to vote, noticing if they haven't voted, reminding them of that fact. We're doing digital media. We have billboards. We have, we have events. We have there's a light rail car in Phoenix. We have a wrap around that, which tells people where to go, the QR code, all this stuff. But if you notice on Amanda's shirt, can you pose once again? Well, I want to see your front, Amanda. Oh, thank you. That's okay. There, see where it says Latino Loud? We tested this on markets with young Latinos and Latinas, and they like that because the younger generation is a little bit different than the older generation in many ways. Well, one way is that they're loud. They want to be heard. They want to be heard now. They are Latino loud, Latino proud. So we went with something flashy because we're largely a younger population as a whole. Median age for Latinos in Arizona is 25 years old. Give you an idea. And it's about a dozen years older than that for non-Latino whites. But the numbers are there. We just need to activate them. But we know that what has happened is it's not yet family behaviors. In other words, younger Latinos might not have ever seen their parents vote. And perhaps because one or both parents aren't U.S. citizens, so maybe they didn't. Or maybe they weren't engaged. And there aren't a lot of them anyway. But all the young Latinos, they're almost all U.S. citizens because they were born here or they were naturalized. But the numbers are there now because we've gone through the maturation process where Latinos have turned 18, right? I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I couldn't have said that the numbers are there for us because Latinos weren't old enough. They were still kids. And even the older ones, you know, celebrating your quinceañera, you're not going to magically turn 18 in November, right? So there has to be this process, but we're there now. But we just need to touch base with them, speak with them, and listen to them, hear from them. This is the new blood that we have to make sure that there's that understanding of, first of all, it's an education process because most of the young people think they invented activism, right? Most of the young people think they invented it. It's like, no. Let's have a talk. Let's talk about our roots, what we've done, what you're building on. You are building on the blood, sweat, and tears of so many Latino activists, right? We've kept our name Chicanos por la Causa because of our history. You know, 1969 is when we were started. So we still have the Chicano name. You know, and there was debate on whether or not we should change our name at some point. You know, it's like, you know, even Kentucky Fried Chicken just goes by KFC now. They don't want to talk about the fried chicken part. We're not going to do that. We are Chicanos por la Causa. It's who we are. But just so you know, about half of the people that we serve are non-Latinos. We help anybody that needs help, marginalized communities. This is what we do. We also were a major vehicle for people who sought PPP loans, small businesses, and we participated nationwide, every state in the union. We're able to help people get payroll protection loans during the pandemic, keep businesses open and alive. We did that because the first round, as you know, those loans did not go to small businesses, female-owned businesses, Latino businesses, people of color businesses. We fought and we got contract, and the federal government said, you guys can do it, and that's what we did. Very proud to have helped so many people. And we continue to help people every chance we get. That's who I am. I'm going to turn it over to these fine gentlemen, but just so, like I said, once again, just so honored to be with so many great people at this conference who have done so much. And I just applaud each and every one of you, first and foremost. Thank you.
Boy, I have to follow him, right? See, that's great. Well, thank you very much. And first of all, let me say that Dr. Cottrell was not able to attend today. There was an illness in the family, so he has to take care of certain things. So he asked me to apologize to you, and perhaps at some other occasion he can join us. But in any case, I remember Chicanos por la Causa, Mexican American Unity Council, East LA Community Union, Oakland's Spanish-speaking Unity Council. All those were the first Latino community development corporations in the country. And this was what, 67, 69, 70, around there. And they came about because of activism at the local level here in Texas and in the other southwestern states. So I was looking up some old records. I found some old records. And I came up with I found a name, Herman Gallegos, out of California, who had gone to Ford Foundation, and Ford was big then and it's big now, right? Ford Foundation. And talked to them about investing in Mexican-American communities. And specifically, he was talking about business. But when it got to one of the VPs, remember Siobhan Oppenheimer?
Yes.
She was
the lead funder of the Ford Foundation.
Yeah, so she got interested, but not exactly what Herman thought, but on a broader scale. and started talking about San Antonio. Let's talk about Arizona. Let's talk about California. So that's how I recall the outset, the creation of the group I was associated with, was worked for at times, and I was the chairman of the board on a couple occasions of the Mexican American Unity Council here in San Antonio. It turned out to be successful. It still is. We ended up building tax credit things, later tax credit projects, housing projects. So that being said and done, how it started, how we were able to get resources into these 5 cities was, didn't just happen by accident. It happened because people saw what was going on in the African American community, the success they were having by when they got able to get funds, they could grow an organization and involve people and provide service. And so Ms. Oppenheimer was part of that, Siobhan. So one day I'm speaking to, we had already started our Mexican American Unity Council. And our goals are big, right? What are we going to do? Oh, we're going to change the world. We're going to do housing. We're going to do economic development. We're going to do this, child care. Of course, we didn't have any money. So, we had a few $1,000s we were able to raise at the city and stuff like that. But it was a Ford Foundation through the efforts of many people that was able to recognize the potential that existed in the Southwest, and by growing the kind of organizations, community-based organizations that he described in Phoenix, and that we put together here in San Antonio, and other people in California did the same thing. So it's when Manuel called me, they called me to talk about community development. I think about the kind of work we did at the outset at the Mexican American Unity Council. And then he can describe further. He was one of the people who was able to find resources for our growth. And so now there's federal tax credit projects, and you can build really nice apartment buildings and things like that. But back then we had to do what we could. And so we looked at social service, which is what people were asking us for. But we wanted to be, as Raza, to be the ones in charge of the board, in charge of the staff, in charge of setting the priorities, and in charge of going to the powers that be and asking what we thought was our due. And as most of you know, for wherever you come from, the west side, or North San Antonio back then, the 50s and 60s, it was a very, very poor neighborhood. Ed can tell you, and there were floods. It flooded all the neighborhoods. There was just all kinds of stuff, disease, all the indicators that you can imagine was something that we had to deal with, and there was people already doing this thing, doing these kind of efforts. So we said, well, what can we do? So we thought that the community development aspect was something that needed to be stressed. We needed to grow. We needed to involve more people. So when Ford Foundation came to us and they actually funded the National Council of La Raza, which incorporated all the different community development groups from here to California. And that gave us the impetus, gave us a vehicle to be able to accomplish stuff. So I'm very happy that we had people like Juan Patlan. I looked at my old files. I found some old files, and I said, look at our initial board of directors. He said, oh man, I'm the one that incorporated Mexican American Unity Council in the state. Hi man, we did some nice stuff. We actually hired people. We actually were able to do stuff, and we learned in the process. We educated ourselves, and we were able to pass this information on and to younger folks. So when we started doing stuff with we wanted to do more, like for example, that was being done now. So we wanted to incorporate and build something that could impact and have a long-standing impact. So long story short, that's basically what I recall in the early days of the Mexican American Unity Council, and I was asked to talk about community development and empowerment. I think that's part of it. There's other ways that we all get together. I was with Cesar Chavez in Stark County. Well, before Cesar Chavez, there was a strike in the Lower Valley. And then I went with a couple other folks, with Willie Velasquez and myself, and I stayed for a while. Pretty soon, Chavez's outfit, Union, couldn't ignore South Texas. They were trying to build what they had in California, grow their resources, and eventually come into Arizona and Texas. But the stuff we did early on that grew into more service-driven type of efforts is what gave us the impetus to create a community development corporation like the Mexican American Unity Council. Thank you. You're on, bro.
I guess it's a chronological thing from Joe to Nacho to me. Last one first in kind of thing. My involvement, they talk about when 69, in 1967, I graduated from Texas Western. We won the national championship in basketball in 66 in El Paso, okay? The first all 5 starting black players in the history of Division I basketball. And you had a coach from Oklahoma the general from Oklahoma State that was mentored by Hank Iba, who was the dean of basketball in the Southwest, and he coached high school girls basketball, and he went from there to go to Texas Western because the University of Texas, Texas A&M, no one would recruit black basketball players. Duh, Do you get that one? So you have this gentleman from Oklahoma going in, and then I'll get to the community economic development part a little bit. But I just want to give you some background in terms of how I met this guy. Joey, I didn't meet you, and you told me Espinosa and some of the founders, as I did to the people at Telacú. Telacú's a monster. Telacú basically created East Los Angeles because of Lizarra and Ruben, the representative of the union movement and so forth. Torres, Representative Torres, okay? Well, this was 66. I'm bragging on you, on Texas Western, but that was 66. I got involved in the Chicano movement about 65. And there was a poet in Segundo Barrio del Paso by the name of Lalo Delgado. And I was taking a sociology class by a gentleman his name was Clark Knowlton. My understanding was that Clark Knowlton was the only person that was able to penetrate Tierra Maria when Reyes Tijerina was, barricaded in. He was a friend of Reyes Tijerina. He was our sociology deal. So I was telling Nacho earlier, in 65, I was still in college, okay? So he and Knowlton pushed us to go work with Lalo Delgado in the juvenile delinquency program. This was before the Equal Opportunity Act of 1960. This was 1 year after 1964. The Equal Opportunity Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, et cetera. So this was 65. So we got our little, los colmillos sort of whetted up to go and deal with all these glue sniffers and stuff in El Segundo Barrio. Well, half of the kids there were Lalo's kids. So we were basically providing teenage mentoring for all practical purposes. That's how I got started. Then the whole issue of the Vietnam War, that prompted me to take a look at the situation a little bit closer as it related to having Chicanos in an inordinate way being killed and being screwed, into the selective service process. And that's what got me going. In 1970, my son was born in 1968. I was in El Paso, Texas. I was teaching. I worked for at the time, there was the Project Bravo, which was the first community action agency in El Paso. That was after the Equal Opportunity Act. Sergeant Shriver, Joe Kennedy, Ted, all the Kennedy folks, that was their program. And that's why I'm listed as a poverty warrior. Mario gave me that. Mario Compian gave me that one. It's actually worse than poverty warrior, but it starts with a P and ends with a P. Put IM in between, okay? Or we were the flag catchers, because we were the feds. I got to D.C. in 1971 over a phone call by a guy named John Clyburn, and he had a black accent from South Carolina, okay? But he was in Washington, D.C., and he was a division director of a technical assistance firm that was called the Educational Systems Corporation. So they're the ones that hired me over the phone from El Paso. I was making $4,200 a year as a teacher, and they offered me $13,500. And I told my wife, "What do you think?" Well, that's 3 times you're making. Of course, DC's a little higher price housing and everything else, but I took the risk. He sent me an American airline flight to, I believe it was in Winston-Salem, Carolina. We went to a retreat, and we looked at Skinnerian approaches to behavioral modification. And you had little roosters and chickens and stuff, and you could modify their behavior by feeding them or overfeeding them and so forth. You believe me, that was a kickoff for me. I said, "This is weird, man." I went from El Paso, and listen to the last name. That's John Clyburn. That is Jim Clyburn's youngest brother. Jim Clyburn is the head, the big head, in South Carolina, Congressman Clyburn. Well, John is his younger brother. He hired me over the phone. So then we started with that. I started working, and we started setting up infrastructure, technical assistance. Juan Gutierrez, we talked about Juan. Juan was supposed to be here today. He worked there. Leo Montalvo, who, by the way, ran for Raza Unida in the Valley, and so forth. Then you had Raúl Aguirre that won this year's presidential. He worked at the migrant division with a lady that's from, her name was, I haven't taken either my privileges or my focus factor today, so bear with me. It's been a while. It's been 48 years or so, 50 years. So they were both working. Rick Bella from El Paso, and Raúl Aguirre was working for the migrant division under Title III-B of the Equal Opportunity Act of 1964. And I got in early. So they saw what I could do maybe, or, whatever. I got into the feds, and that's when our relationship started going. That was like in 62, 73, all right? And my responsibility was the migrant stream from South Texas to the Midwest stream, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio, Iowa, Michigan, et cetera. That was my territory from D.C. And that's where I started meeting. And if you, we're looking at 50 years of Raza Unida. It was right in that period, in the early 70s, okay? So then I started meeting José. I met José Ángel, I met Nacho, I met Mario, I met everybody through our interplay and our connections regarding community service. Rafael Torres and Luera were key in all this. We had a network, national network of farm worker programs that was supported, by the way, of Cesar and Dolores Huerta. They supported our program. And we did a lot in that area. Well, after that, and I used my number 2 pencil on this one. I wanted to wrap this thing up. I knew what Nacho has done. Mr. Garcia, who I hadn't met yet, but I knew I had to wrap that up in some way to include the politics of it all. both from a P, small p and a big P. And by a big P, I'm talking about the President of the United States. I'm talking about the agency heads that I worked under, the governors of the state of Texas at the time, and the Raza Unida party. And the encumbrances that all these people had at certain years to basically stop the Raza Unida movement and to stop any benefit that the Raza Unida that had any tie-ins with any programs. They were hit. They were hit. And I was there to see it. Okay? So I went from the migrant division. Nixon left, and I was in D.C. when he waved goodbye and talked to his dog and everything else. We had a lot of parties in Washington, D.C. that day. A lot of parties. We didn't come in early to work the next day. Well, he was gone. But in the interim, when the Office of Economic Opportunity started, obviously, you're looking at the Kennedy, Sergeant Shriver, all the liberals, the progressives, we're going to fight a war on poverty. That was LBJ's thing. Well, that sort of cost them the South too, above and beyond the voting rights situation. I went through all that at that level, okay? But then at the local level, at the Texas level, at my level, with Nacho and Mario and Juan Patlan and William Arias and all the folks and Rueda and Rafa, as I started engaging with the local people that were trying to engage into social and economic change for our communities, especially in rural areas. So then Nixon tried to dismantle the Office of Opportunity. I was a member of the American Federation of Government Employees, local number 1 in D.C. Local number 1. We fought, and he did not dismantle it. But he didn't dissolve it, but he dismantled it. He put Migrant Head Start at HHS. He put me and others that were in Title IIIB under the Comprehensive Employment Training Act in the Department of Labor, but we still had the same grantees. We still had the United Migrant Opportunity Services. We still had the farm worker programs that were still in place because of the efforts that was done under the Office of Economic Opportunity. Your Migrant Head Start, all of your community food and nutrition programs, okay? So he did dismantle the agency, but he dismantled the agency, and then he split in, these dates are very key as it relates to the politics part of it. From 1974 to 1977, that's 3 years. That's when Gerald Ford was the president. He was the president for 3 years. After he pardoned Nixon, he was the president. That's where we had it the best. He was the best. That's when Zavala County Economic Development Corporation got funded. That's where the majority of the Mexican American Unity Council funds got funded, because it wasn't a crude transition of Republicans against Democrats. Actually, Gerald Ford was pretty good for us. I'm telling you, because it gets better as we go. Okay, so that was from 74 to 77. Okay? That's when the money started coming out. That's where you had a gentleman by the name of Luis Ramirez from Colorado who encouraged folks in Texas and encouraged folks in Arizona with Chicanos por la Causa, because the Office of Economic Development funded Chicanos por la Causa. We also, and I had 3 programs at that time. Once I did a turnaround from the Department of Labor, and then Luis Ramirez hired me, and I became a program analyst for the Mexican American Unity Council, and then we started the Zavala County in Crystal City Zavala County Economic Development Corporation, when Jose Angel was the county judge and also the chair of that 501c3 corporation. And then I had a program in Puerto Rico called the San Juan Community Development Corporation, and that one was pushed by Carlos Romero Arceló, who was basically a blue guy. In Puerto Rico, there's the blues, there's the greens, and the reds. He was sort of Republican. He came in right in to the Gerald Ford thing. He fit in perfect, no problems there. We did great things in Puerto Rico. Okay, everything from fishing co-ops to artistic kinds of ventures and so forth with that corporation. Then we had the Unity Council. Well, during that period of time, from 74 to 77, I got in on that part of Unity Council through Willie. Of course, Willie Benavides. Arnold Flores was also very, very critical in that. Judge Peña, Albert Peña, was also pro, community development and so forth. So we had friends. We were friendly. The two big projects that I was engaged in, there's two. The two big ones as far as the Unity Council, that was the good years for the Unity Council. They were humming. They were rolling. Okay? I came in here in 1977. We cut the ribbon for the first big project was the renovation of the Crockett School, where Henry Gonzalez went to junior high, which is still at 3200 West Commerce down there. And it's empty. There's no activity. Unlike this gentleman here, there's no activity. Okay, so there's politics with a small p and there's politics with a big P. But then, so that was a big project for us. We provided the seed money. I recommended the seed money to renovate that building. And I remember the guy from Uvalde, Turi, el difunto, I can't remember his name. But there were all sorts of big shots, the mayor and myself and all these big shots coming in to cut the deal. Si quieren pollo en la olla, voten por Gabe Tafoya. Gabe Tafoya was working with Juan Patlan at the time. He was a card, okay? And he's the one who said, hijo, me siento bien toda dar. Dice, porque son puros fregones aquí, tú y the mayor y todos, puros fregonos. Pero éranos yo, comenzaba con yo. Y éranos yo, el mayor y tú. He went first. He died, unfortunately, of a very weird illness. And a good guy, very funny guy. Those were the kind of people we engaged in. Well, that became it. That was and it's still an incredible building. It's still, I drove by there today, but it's empty. The activities are empty. I mean, there's nothing, sir, I'm sorry to say, of what you guys are doing, and because of what can happen with a governance structure if it's not governed the right way with a small p. And then if you have a big P problem from the governor, from the president, you got double whammy. So those are not good factors or elements in any healthy organization. You guys had some great representatives in Arizona, during that time.
Yes.
You had some incredible representatives that represented Arizona forcefully, and so did California. Unfortunately, we didn't have that. We did not have that here in Texas. Okay, the second big project, and this is an incredible thing. Of course, there were minor, the way it was set up as far as the funding for all these programs, in the beginning, and it's not just the Republicans or Nixon or anything else. In the beginning, you apply for a proposal, you saw where the needs are, you weighed where poor people live, what can be done, the food issues, whatever. You sort of zero in and you strategize where you need to focus your money and your energy and your time in order to hopefully make it grow. Okay, it's about growth, community economic development, okay? And a lot of people don't understand, to include my former board of directors. I just resigned September 1 after 32 years, okay? And I had an educational program where we helped thousands of kids in the state of Texas. But then there was other issues that came up. But the whole issue of what Mr. Garcia was saying and what what Nacho was saying is that the concept, look, there's no difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit. There's no difference between a nonprofit organization and a for-profit. The only difference is that in a for-profit, you have shareholders and investors. Okay, so if you get a grant, that's not an investor. You're bequeathing that program to do certain things, to provide schools, to take an outdated school like Crockett School and make it into the base of the whole west side of San Antonio under the Mexican American Unity Council flag, and you had incredible leaders. But, I read a study the other day, it's very interesting, which has nothing to do, but it does. Age sort of takes care of everything. There was a study in California of Asians that started donut shops. And the threshold is 3 generations, 30 years. When the Vietnamese and the Cambodians and stuff came into California in droves, they had, and if you've been to California not lately, but in those days, there were Asian donut shops. There's a few in Pleasanton and so forth where the Asians are making donuts. They got into the donut thing. Well, that was year 1 through 10. The second year, the 10 through 20, is the passion year. We've made it. Chicanos por la Causa made it. Now we've got to really move. We got resources, we got a building, we got assets, physical assets, and liquid assets on the side. Okay, just like any other business. Then the third generation, do you think an Asian kid after 30 years in California is not at Stanford already, or UCLA, or Berkeley? They don't want to make donuts, they want to make computers. It's an age thing. Things, like my daddy said, todo tiene eso hasta aquí. And after 30, 40 years, it changes. Somebody made the issue of age. That's a big factor. I don't think a lot of young people want to make donuts. So I don't think a lot of people have that passion. I wish we could re-energize. And the whole issue of the Latino vote, God bless you, it is needed, and be loud, and they are louder. Because ya no podemos gritar. Do you see what I'm saying? It's been a long time. So how do you instill that passion, that second component of any successful endeavor or venture? After 20 years, you better be there. After 10 years, you better have the cake. You better have baked the cake, and then you do all the frosting like this gentleman talks about, all kinds of different programs. And if you don't, by the 30th year, ya se acabó tequería. That's it.
So,
just if anything, just energy in itself. You got to have a lot. I burned up 3 Volvos in the last 30 years, man. Burned them up. Estaba peor que lo era, with my Volvos, man. I was all over the place. I'm only 36. Parece que estoy medio más. No se crea. No, really. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to do it. Is that it? I'm off?
No.
Okay.
I think we have time for.
Okay. One more. I'll conclude with my wind up on the small P's and the big P's. Okay. So then, the Unity Council is not what it was. Chicanos por la Causa is probably there and more, and Telacuza. They're incredible. They're incredible. And in Zavala, let's go for the Zavala County Community Development Corporation. Boy, that was a doozy. All right. So after 7 years of Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter won the election in 1977. Okay. So then Luis Ramirez, el director, I'll mix it up, the director of the Office of Economic Development, who was my boss, funded the Zavala County Economic Development Corporation, as he did the Unity Council. But the Unity Council did, the second biggie, before I finish the Bob, the second big project, this was incredible. Lila Cockrell was elected in 1975. She was the mayor. She had a very good relationship with Herschel Bernard, the attorney for the Unity Council, had a good relationship with Juan Patlan, and they came to Washington. They said, we're going to build a Hyatt Regency Hotel on the Riverwalk. Whoa, on the Riverwalk. The first Hyatt, not the big one, but the one that's still there in the, the first one on the Riverwalk. And if CSA, if you guys give us seed money to do the soft work, to do the drawings, to do the deal, to present the proposal, to hire a structural engineer, we would present it to the Economic Development Administration for construction to create jobs, and they tied in with the Hyatt Corporation. The Unity Council, listen to this one, had 10% equity in that hotel. 10% of that hotel's revenues that came in went to the Unity Council. What I'm trying to say about the donut deal, the 10, 20, 30, well, as leadership changes within any corporate structure, whether it be for-profit or not-profit, as leadership changes, especially the board of directors, because they call the shots, and they hire the executive director, or the CEO, or whatever. They sold the 10% equity. They sold the 10%. I don't know who it was. I'm not going to name names. They got rid of 10% of a major hotel on the Riverwalk, the Unity Council. It hurts us. It hurt. Of course, I was out by then because everybody was out by then. All right? So that was the second thing. But otherwise, there were other ventures. The Unity Council is still there, but it's not as productive as it could be, or change, but much of it is change agent as it was before because of the leadership, for all practical purposes. That's my opinion. So when Carter came in, I'm almost to wind it up. When Carter came in 1977. Well, like I said, Gerald Ford, I think Lyndon Baines Johnson, speaking of Gerald Ford, he said, Gerald is a great guy. Of course, Gerald Ford was an All-American at the University of Michigan. Of course, he stumbled everywhere. And I remember at Express News here in San Antonio, he was just about to buy the tamal with the shucks still on, and the headline was, "Oh, shucks." He's about to buy, Squeaky Fromm tried to murder him over there, the crazy, what's his name, the idiot over there. He didn't have the best luck at it, but he left. He got beat by Jimmy Carter. Hijo, that was a different ballgame. Republican to Democrat, Jimmy Carter. Great guy. His staff was a little flaky, to include Hamilton Jordan that spit on a lady at Foggy Bottom. And, he did not have the best support staff. But he personally was a decent person and so forth. Well, by that time, the Zavala County Economic Development Corporation, Tutti, had already been funded. And they had already presented their proposals. And the board of directors decided they wanted to do a co-op, an agricultural co-op. The problem was that Dolph Risco was a governor from 1973 to 1979. So during that period, Dolph Risco was the governor of Texas. And about 2.5 to 3 weeks after Carter was made president, there was a call from the state of Texas, from the governor's office, to see what they could do with José Gutierrez and the Raza Unida party that took over this program. They're going to do a communist co-op and the whole 9 yards. About 2.5 weeks after the inauguration of the president. At that time, the director of the Community Services Administration was Graciela Olivares. Graciela Olivares was the first Chicana to graduate from Notre Dame, very high credentials. She didn't have a lot of experience in community service or community action or community economic development. She was made the head of the agency. Well, when she first got there, he's una Chicana, y pues Democrat y todo. Every week we'd get pan de dulce from mi tierra over to Pepe Lucero would send us baggage of, and then once that phone call from the White House was made to her as the head of the agency, no more marranitos, man. Because I was the analyst, I was a program analyst, and Luis, unfortunately, was under a lot. Luis Ramirez, my boss, was under a lot of heat. The issue here was that it was done right from the first, even when it was before all the politics. The issue was when you provide somebody $5 to $6 million, you provide an administrative budget and you provide a programmatic budget. What are you going to do with the money? I want to hire, I want to hire the staff. I want to get a business manager. You hire that with your administrative money, and then with your hard money, that's what you say. We need $2 million because we're going to buy this land. We're going to, form a co-op. You're going to do all the program part, okay? Now, the program part, the administrative part is obligated because you have to pay salaries in order to succeed in any organization. But the programmatic part, even with Chicanos por la Causa, Mr. Garcia, you had to have pre-approval prior to doing the thing that you wanted to do with that money. And of course, they had the additional encumbrance of having the governor of the state of Texas not very happy with that grant. They tried to remove that grant. Fortunately, there were a couple of people in the legal component of our organization that helped us out that said you can't remove the administrative. That's obligated. We'll get sued on that one. But on the other one, it hasn't been approved yet. And until it is approved, so basically what happened is they got starved out. Their administrative money ran out. There's no programs developed, et cetera. And that's it. That's it. That was my experience. As a mid-level guy, don't think I was that big, like Gabe Tafoya, éramos yo. I was a mid-level guy, but I was the intermediary and the advocate for the program that I was presenting to the funding source. So that's my deal. Last words. For those young people that are interested in getting into a community development concept, it's worth it. Because you can get all the grants in the world, and grants are to do a specific kind of a thing. And if you don't do it, you send the money back to the feds and you won't see it again. But if you, like in my endeavor for the last 32 years, we have millions of dollars worth of physical assets and buildings that we bought through a 501c2, which is a real estate holding company, for example, and other mechanisms that you can structure that can only provide back to the 501c3. So there is the concept of having grants is okay, but don't depend on them porque se van a acabar. If you continue and you have physical assets, you can leverage those physical assets to develop a program. But you got to have cash in the pocket to do that. And that's the best way you can do it from a community-based approach. And that's been my life work for the last 50 years. And I appreciate the opportunity. I hope you've learned from all of us. And I did want to bring in the political angle because it was political. It was political. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. At the national level, at the state level, and at the local level. It was political. And Raza Unida did get slammed through politics. It was hard. There were a lot of obstacles. And I'm proud to be part of it. And I appreciate your attention. And I wish you guys a lot of luck. Stay with it. You too. You too.
Do we have time for questions? I think so, right? A couple of 10 minutes?
Whose name? Mine? Eduardo Gutierrez. Eduardo Gutierrez. My name? Eduardo Gutierrez. Nacho?
Ignacio Perez.
Nacho Perez.
Ignacio Perez. And I thought we introduced ourselves, didn't we?
Joseph Garcia.
I think she's recording. So, questions? I think we have a few minutes. Comments? Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Community Economic Development Corporation. It's a corporation, usually under the IRS code, a 501c3, which means that you don't have to pay taxes, for incoming resources, et cetera. And you can have for-profits that are ancillaries of the 501c3 if you want an arm's length situation, especially, am I getting too academic for you?
No.
Okay.
Wanted to know what that corporation does.
What it does is it builds assets within the community. You get money, you provide services, you could do whatever service you want, but it also develops assets within that community that's outlined in your proposal. This street, this housing project, this deal, that's what it does. You bring in resources for the betterment of the community that will renovate housing. Like on Guadalupe, there's a lot of good stock and a lot of bad stock on Guadalupe, both residential and commercial. Well, there needs to be a little bit, in my opinion. I'm not going to get into local politics per se, but basically there are properties there that have been owned for 3 generations, and of course it's like if you go to Southtown in San Antonio right now. I mean, we bought a building for $350,000 where I was housed. We have 3 properties there. Nacho lives right around that area. $350,000 is $1.6 million now. Well, guess what? With that, and guess what? We have about 90% equity. On the other 2 buildings, they're owned outright. So if you rent them out to a third party, you could use that money to help your housing people in that block. And nobody has anything to say about it. It has been defederalized, or the state has no hand in it because it was third-party money coming in, either through a bank, through equity loans, or whatever. There's a lot. I mean, I'll tell you what, development guys that are big guys, they know all these angles at a much bigger scale. What I'm saying is that we as a community need to learn some of these skills. And some of our young people understand that money talks and what walks, because that's what runs this town, any town, or to include Phoenix. That's what it takes. Unless you have resources yourself, you're going to continue to go for grants. You're going to continue to go for grants. It's a never-ending deal. You'll have money to do the services, pay your staff, pero no te va a dejar nada. No te va a dejar nada at the end of the game.
Any questions?
That's it. That's the concept, sir, is to mobilize both liquid assets and physical assets for your community that you want to serve and that you have a passion to serve. And if you don't have a passion, then get out of the business, go into real estate or something like that, or banking, whatever. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort, but it can be done.
You have a question here?
Yeah.
Yeah, question for Nacho.
Hey, David.
Not all the projects were actually, quite a few were not successful.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
They were not successful.
What was done?
What about the Chaleco? Can you talk about that? The restaurant?
Well, it's like any business, I would imagine, even with projects that have non-traditional money, which, for example, a lot of our groups are associated with, they don't succeed for different reasons, maybe management or there are different reasons, locations. Because any kind of business has the same economic drivers and deficits, regardless of what state or city you're in. Okay, anybody else? Miss? I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna respond to that. Chaleco was run by Mayo members, real young ones,
Yeah.
just 18, 19-year-olds, and they did not, they got the first initial funding, but then they never got any more help.
Okay.
And the initial funding was not like a huge amount.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, sir.
Joe, you do a great job for the organization, great for la causa. But the question that always lingers out that I hear is there's a very hard problem in trying to get young voters to come out and vote. They might register, or they might not be registered, and those that are registered don't come out to vote.
That's not true.
Okay. Well, my question is, how do we get young people to go to vote, or in general?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I was in Las Vegas at a retreat that we were holding, and there'd been a concert across the street. But all the young people went to the concert, and they were staying at the hotel because it's Sunday night, the cheap rates, and there was this huge long line to the elevators, because the elevator's going to take up so many people. And I was looking at this group of young people, just an endless stream of young people, and they're all, most of them were in fishnets, for some reason, fishnets. I mean, they were all letting everything hang out, whether they, I don't know how anyone could even, the fishermen didn't have any fishnets anymore, that's where they were, they're all on the young people. But I'm thinking, how would I get these people to vote? Because they didn't look engaged in much except in the moment, right? And this is the toughest part, is that we realize that part of us is going to have to turn it over to the young people themselves and let them have their voice. Let them, if they look at the world differently than I do, that's okay. Then I have to appreciate what they're looking at and help them with their vision. Help them make the connection. And if you notice Latino Loud, it's more than just voting. For us, it's engaging them in all things in life. Become more engaged in life, period. And voting is a part of that. But we have to let them do it their way. It's not going to work for me to say, no, this is the way it's done. We do it this way. We have to respect them to do their way. And when they have a certain way of doing it, a certain vision, we need to help them and enable and empower them to fulfill their vision, because they're brand new at it. It's no different than when, all right, this is a young audience in here. Okay, it's no different than when I was young and the older people were telling me, that's not the way you do it. You know, you've got to you respect authority, you know, stay in your lane. You know, look at that crazy hat you're wearing, or whatever it may be. We were trying to have change. The young people today are looking for their own change, to their own voice. I think we have to respect that. And when we talk with them, I think we need to ask questions, because after a while they start to ask us questions in return. But if we just try to tell them something, you've turned them off and they're not going to talk to you. So I know it's a kind of a rambling answer, but we have to make the connection on why voting matters. Because they need to see candidates who look like them. They need to hear about issues that they can relate with, and they know it matters. We need to be very specific. Right now, what we found is that most young Latinos, they're kind of turning away from the two-party system. Many of them are independents because they see there's a polarization and it doesn't work. But the way the system is set up today in our nation, as you know, it's a two-party system nation.
So, thank you, Joe, but you don't see that man over there? But he raised his hand.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I like your answer. We do need to turn it over to the youth. So I used to work for an organization called Amnesty International, and we had 40,000 members, and we didn't know how to attract the youth because it was all sociologists, professors, teachers, lawyers in there. And so our director, Jack Healy, decided to have rock and roll concerts. So we did a tour here that included in the States, Bono. Then we did an international tour with Peter Gabriel, Sting, Yusuf Endur,
Jesus.
Springsteen, and but our membership went up in 2 years from 40 to 400,000. And the reason, and we had a conflict in Amnesty because the viejitos didn't want to let the youth take over. The youth had more imaginative ways than organizing and educating and talking to you. So one of the things is we have to find out, who are they listening to? So if Bono or Springsteen or Sting told him you ought to join Amnesty, they join. Not if I went and told them. Once you got them in the house, then you have to turn the house over to them, as you were saying. Because our old methods may help on some things, but they've got to create their own road.
Yeah, it is. We have a free concert on October 29 in Phoenix. 5,000 seats, free tickets, a concert featuring Latino acts. One of the groups is Chicano Batman. And I'm like, all right, I like Batman. Like, no, it's not Batman, Chicano Batman. We were trying to get Bad Bunny. And I was thinking, I like Bugs Bunny. He's like, no, it's not Bugs Bunny, it's Bad Bunny. I mean, so, but you're right, we're turning it over to them. But what we're doing is celebrating and get out the vote and letting them have a good time. And you have to make voting, this is going to sound weird, you have to make voting cool, which is not even a cool word, I think, and sexy. It has to be that. Because right now we try to feed voting as if it's oatmeal. Eat your oatmeal. Nobody wants to eat your oatmeal. We need to let them what they want to eat and digest it in the way they want to do it.
Sounds good. That's excellent.
Oatmeal?
I think it's going to be, it's 2:45. We're supposed to, that should be the end of it. Is there a, okay.